You think you know someone just because you've slept beside them for over 40 years. But I learned the hard way that even the oldest love can hide the filthiest betrayal. What he did to me. Just thinking about it still leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. But stay with me until the end. Because in the end, I had the last laugh. My name is Ludmila Sokolova. I'm 78 years old now. I've lived through a lot in this lifetime, but nothing quite like this. Let me tell you everything in this story. It was a hot summer morning in Georgia, deep in the southern part of the United States, and I was sitting on my creaky wooden porch with the sweet smell of black coffee drifting in the air. The wind carried the distant hum of a neighbor's old radio playing tunes from decades ago, songs that always make me remember when life felt simpler. The boards beneath my feet groaned with every little shift, and the golden sunlight painted everything with a soft, warm glow. My dog Boris, a sleepy old golden retriever, lay dozing by my rocking chair. I thought my life was stable. Not perfect. It never was. But steady. 42 years of marriage with Mikhail, a man with a quiet voice, big calloused hands, and a gentle way of cupping my face when he smiled. We met when we were young, introduced through our immigrant parents, Russian-born folks who dreamed of an honest American life filled with dignity. Together we built everything. A home, 3 kids, modest savings, and, most of all, a predictable routine. Or so I thought. That morning, everything felt normal, but it wasn't. There was something off in the air, a tension you couldn't quite place, like the universe was holding its breath. Then the doorbell rang. I stood up slowly, my joints complaining as usual, and made my way to the front door. When I opened it, there she was, Alina, our former housekeeper. It had been months since she'd abruptly quit, saying she had to care for her sick mother in Florida. At the time, I'd thought it odd, but I didn't press. I trusted her. She had been part of our home for 10 years. She cooked, cleaned, took care of everything like it was her own house. And more than anything, I'd come to love her like a daughter. But now, standing on my porch with red eyes and messy hair, she looked nothing like the strong woman I remembered. Ludmila, her voice cracked. I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago. My stomach twisted. A part of me already knew. You know how your body sometimes senses things before your mind catches up? Like a cold shiver running down your spine. He's not going to tell you. He never did. But I can't carry this anymore. Her eyes dropped to the floor. I had an affair with Mikhail for 10 years. The world didn't just stop. It collapsed. It was like my whole house was suddenly sinking into quicksand, and I was frozen. No ground beneath me. No breath in my lungs. I grabbed the door frame for balance. I felt a pressure in my chest, like someone had their hand clenched around my ribs. 10 years? My voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. She nodded, tears spilling from her eyes. I couldn't scream, couldn't cry. Just silence, deep, endless silence. It was like every moment of love, every church Sunday, every vacation, every dinner, every winter night under the same blanket, had been a lie. He told me he was going to leave you, Alina said. He always promised me he would. But he never did. Something inside me broke right then, and something else was born. A kind of strength that only pain can carve. A coldness, a clarity. I didn't scream at her. I didn't slam the door. I just nodded slowly and shut it. I walked to the bathroom mirror, stared at myself for a long time. The wrinkles around my eyes looked deeper. My mouth was trembling, but my eyes were solid stone. "You'll pay for this, Mikhail," I thought. But in my own way. I could have confronted him right then, made a scene. But I'm not that kind of woman. I'm a woman of war, of resistance. I grew up hearing stories from my mother about starvation in Siberia. I learned that whoever explodes first loses. The one who watches in silence wins. And right there, in that stuffy bathroom with the scent of lavender soap still in the air, I made a decision. I wouldn't be the victim. I would become the most unexpected chapter of Mikhail's life, the one he could never erase. If this grandma's story is already touching your heart, leave a like. It helps the channel so much and shows that you want to hear more real stories like this. Make sure to subscribe and hit that little bell so you never miss the next ones. And if you know someone who needs to hear something like this, share it. Sometimes a simple story can turn someone's whole day around. Thank you for being here and listening with your heart. The first thing I did after Alina left was sit down. Not on the couch, not in my favorite chair, but on the kitchen floor. I don't know why. Maybe because everything that had been stable in my life suddenly felt like it was upside down, and I needed to touch something solid. Cold tiles beneath me, familiar linoleum that Mikhail and I had chosen together 30 years ago. I ran my hand across the floor's tiny cracks and stains. They'd always made me think of a life well lived. Now, they just felt like scars I hadn't noticed before. I stayed there for a long time, just breathing. I didn't cry. Not then. That's the thing about betrayal when it hits you at 78. It doesn't come with the fireworks of youth. It comes with silence. With a hollowness that seeps into your bones and makes the air around you feel too heavy to breathe. Later that afternoon, I made Mikhail's favorite dinner. Yes, you heard that right. Chicken Kiev, mashed potatoes, and cucumber salad. All from scratch, just like he liked it. I set the table with the nice plates, lit one candle, opened a bottle of red wine we'd been saving for our anniversary. It was only a few months away. When he walked in from his afternoon walk, I smiled like nothing had happened. He leaned in to kiss me, and I let him, because I wasn't ready, to let him know what I knew. Not yet. "Wow, you made all this?" he asked, hanging his hat by the door. "Of course, just felt like doing something special." I smiled sweetly, watching him carefully. Every blink, every scratch of his beard, every little pause. I was reading him like a book. He didn't suspect a thing, and that hurt more than anything. We ate. We drank. He told me about running into Mr. Petrov at the grocery store, about the tomatoes on sale, about how the dog park was full of kids, even though it was Tuesday. And I nodded, laughed in the right places, refilled his wine glass. All the while, I was screaming inside. How many times had he sat across from me at this very table, smiling, chewing, joking, while carrying another woman in his heart, in his arms? How many nights had I massaged his tired back, prayed for his health, folded his clothes, while he lied to my face? And worse, how many years had I trusted him with every vulnerable piece of me? I couldn't sleep that night. I lay there next to him, staring at the ceiling fan spinning round and round, as if it too were chasing its tail, going nowhere. Around 3 a.m, I slipped out of bed, went down to the basement, and opened the old chest I hadn't touched in over 2 decades. Inside were boxes of photos, letters, and one small notebook, my old journal from when we first moved to Georgia. I sat on the cold floor and began flipping through the pages. There he was, in ink. Mikhail, my love, my partner, my safety. Don't know what I would do without him, I had written on a page dated April 14th, 1978. I touched the faded ink and whispered aloud, "Well, now I know." And in that moment, something shifted in me. I wasn't just sad anymore. I was furious. Not the kind of anger that burns out in a night, but the kind that smolders, slow and steady, until it has enough heat to change everything around it. Started writing again. Right there in the margins of those old pages. New thoughts, new plans. Because I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. And I sure as hell wasn't going to leave quietly. The next morning, I brewed my coffee as usual. Dark, no sugar. Just the way I liked it. Bitter and honest. I stared out the kitchen window while the coffee pot hissed. The sky was gray, heavy with that thick southern humidity that sticks to your skin like regret. I heard Mikhail upstairs, humming one of those old Soviet melodies he loved. And just like that, I felt that tightness in my chest again. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something colder, sharper, like a needle under the skin. I didn't say a word to him that morning. I didn't have to. I was already planning, something he couldn't even begin to imagine. You see, I wasn't going to confront him like some fragile, scorned wife. No. I was going to unravel him quietly from the inside out, like termites in a rotten beam, silent, slow, but deadly. First, I needed information. I didn't know exactly how long their affair had lasted, not in detail. Alina had only said 10 years, but I wanted proof. Dates, places, moments. I wanted to see it in his own words. Mikhail was many things, but smart with technology he was not. He still used the same password for everything. Matryoshka 1972. A reference to the year we got engaged. Pathetic. While he was out running errands, I opened his laptop in the study. My hands trembled only a little as I typed it in. Access granted. His email inbox was a goldmine of carelessness. Messages going back years. Most of them were boring. Utility bills, phishing newsletters, the occasional message from the community. Church. But then I found a folder. It was named Old Receipts. I clicked it. Inside, dozens of emails. All from alinavladiyahoo.com. I started reading. My love, yesterday was perfect. I still smell your cologne on me. I wish you'd tell her. I'm tired of hiding like we're doing something wrong. I found an apartment in Savannah. 2 bedrooms, just like we said. Each message was a blade, a fresh, deliberate cut across my soul. And yet, I read every single one. All the way back to one that stopped my breath cold. Dated October 3rd, 2012. That was the same week I'd been in the hospital with pneumonia. The same week Mikhail had held my hand and whispered that he was scared of losing me. That same night, he'd emailed her. She's asleep now. I'll come to you after 9. My hand flew to my mouth. My vision blurred, but I didn't cry. I sat there, the cursor blinking on that cursed screen, and I made myself read it again. He had left me, sick and weak in a hospital bed, to go warm another woman's sheets. I closed the laptop slowly, quietly. Then I stood up and walked straight to the kitchen drawer, the one with all our legal documents, tucked neatly in folders. I pulled out our will, the one we'd updated 5 years ago after Mikhail's surgery. It left everything, the house, the savings, even the boat, to both of us, split equally. But there was one thing I had insisted on back then, a detail he had laughed at. I had made sure we included a joint power of attorney, with me listed as the primary, and now that meant I could do things, real things, without him knowing. It was just a matter of how. Later that night, as he sat in the recliner watching one of those black and white war movies he loved, I stood behind him silently, watching his shape, outlined by the television glow. He looked old, tired. He wasn't the man I had married. But then again, maybe he never had been. "You want some tea?" I asked. He nodded. "That'd be nice, Liuda." Liuda. The nickname he'd used for me since we were teenagers. Hearing it now made my stomach churn. I made the tea, chamomile, with honey. Stirred slowly. I brought it to him and watched. Him sip it like nothing in the world was wrong. And maybe, for him, nothing was. Because people like Mikhail, men who lie with ease, they don't believe they'll ever be caught. They think their charm is a shield, their gray hair a mask, their age a free pass. But I wasn't going to let him take one more peaceful sip of his life without tasting the bitterness of what he had done. So while he drank that tea, I started writing a list, not a to-do list, a to-take-back list, my dignity, my control, my future. And by the time I finished writing it, I knew exactly how I would begin. The next few days, I played the part. I cooked his meals. I listened to his stories. I even laughed at his tired old jokes like I used to. Every detail of our daily life kept moving, like clockwork. He didn't suspect a thing. But inside, I was sharpening my mind like a blade. That list I had written, I folded it into the back of my recipe book. Between the page for beet soup and cherry vareniki, where he'd never think to look. Step 1. The finances. I had always let Mikhail handle our money. That was the way it had always been, and I never thought twice about it. I trusted him. We had a joint account, and he paid the bills. I handled the groceries in the house. It had worked for decades, but not anymore. That Thursday, I took the car and drove into town, to the First Federal Credit Union, the small bank we'd used since we moved to Georgia. The young man at the desk, I think his name was Corey, was polite, helpful, and just nervous enough around an elderly woman with a determined look in her eye. "Mrs. Sokolova, are you sure you want to open a new checking account in your name only?" "Yes, Corey, I'm very sure. And please make it discreet. No mail to the house." He blinked, then nodded. I could tell he wanted to ask questions, but he didn't. Good boy. I transferred $5,000 from our joint account. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to give me room to breathe. Enough to feel like I had a weapon in my hand again. That night, I sat at the dinner table watching Mikhail cut his roast beef. The same hands that had once held our newborn son had held another woman for 10 years. I thought about how many times I'd looked at those hands and felt comfort. Now, all I saw were lies carved into skin and bone. I began to ask small, innocent questions. Do you remember that cruise we talked about a few years ago? To Alaska? He smiled. Sure. What about it? I was thinking, maybe we should do something like that again. One last big trip, before we get too old. He chuckled. Liuta, we're already too old. I laughed. Speak for yourself. He leaned across the table and touched my hand. I didn't flinch. I let him. But inside, something twisted, because I wasn't asking about Alaska for fun. I was testing him, watching his reaction, seeing how easily he could plan the future with me, even while his heart was stuck in the bed of another woman. He passed the test, meaning he failed it completely. He said, maybe next year. I knew what that meant. He was still stalling, still trying to find a way to have both lives at once, the one with me, and the one he'd built in secret. But he wouldn't get that chance. Friday morning, I visited Irina. She was my oldest friend in the world. We'd gone to school together back in New Jersey, before both our families moved south in the 90s. She lived just a few blocks away now, in a little yellow house with a porch swing and the best apple pie in Georgia. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, she knew something was wrong before I said a word. Ludmila? Come in, come in. What's happened? I didn't speak until we were sitting at her kitchen table with tea. Then I told her everything. Every word. She didn't interrupt. Not once. By the end, her hands were clenched on the tablecloth and her eyes were red. That bastard. That rotten, gray-haired bastard. I smiled for the first time in days, because hearing her say it out loud made it real. I'm going to ruin him, Irina. Not with noise, not with drama, with silence, with precision. She nodded. What do you need? A notary. And a lawyer. Irina didn't hesitate. She grabbed her phone and made 2 calls. By that evening, I had an appointment for Monday morning with a woman named Tatiana Morozov, a family lawyer originally from Moscow who now worked in Savannah. Irina had used her during her own messy divorce 10 years ago. She's sharp, Irina told me, and she doesn't play games. Just like me. That night, Mikhail kissed my forehead before bed. He said, "Sweet dreams, Liuta." And I whispered back, "You too." But in my mind, I added, "Because soon, they'll be the only piece you have left." Monday came like a storm cloud. Mikhail was already out of the house when I woke up. Said he had errands in Brunswick, some supplies to pick up for a fishing trip he was planning with the boys next weekend. It didn't matter. I had my own business to handle. I dressed in my best beige skirt, a cream blouse with lace on the collar, and a pair of low heels I hadn't worn since my grandson's graduation. I looked in the mirror and fixed a strand of hair behind my ear. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize myself. Not because I looked different, but because of what I was about to do. I drove the hour to Savannah, to a small office on the corner of Liberty Street. There was a magnolia tree blooming in front, and the scent hung thick in the warm morning air. Tatiana Morozov met me in the lobby. Mid-40s, sharp cheekbones, lipstick dark as cherries. Her handshake was firm. Her eyes locked into mine like she could see straight through to the truth I carried. "Mrs. Sokolova," Irina told me a bit, "but I want to hear it from you." I told her everything. From the first day Alina showed up on my porch to the email I had read in Mikhail's inbox. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just told it like it was. Clean, cold, and clear. Tatiana took notes the entire time, her pen moving like a violin bow across the page. "Do you want a divorce?" she asked when I finished. I shook my head. "Not yet. I want control first. Power of attorney, financial leverage. I want to be prepared in case he tries to turn this around on me." She smiled like a soldier given permission to go to war. "We'll start with asset protection, quietly. Have you moved any funds already?" 5,000. Opened a personal account. "Good. We'll make that look like routine spending. What's your access to retirement and property documents?" "I know where everything is. It's all in a locked drawer at home." "I have the key." Tatiana nodded approvingly. "Mrs. Sokolova, you're not just heartbroken, you're strategic." I gave a small laugh. I was a mother of 3 by age 26. You don't survive that without learning how to plan 3 steps ahead. We set a second meeting for Friday. She would review the full legal structure of our assets and begin drafting protections in my name. And then, if I wanted, she'd be ready to file. I left her office with a folder under my arm, and something else inside me I hadn't felt in years. Fire. By the time I got home, it was late afternoon. Mikhail wasn't back yet, and the house was quiet. Too quiet. I walked to the kitchen, set down my purse, and noticed something odd. The mail was open on the table, and in the pile a letter, addressed to me, but torn open already. My heart pounded. It was from the bank. A routine note about the new account I had opened. I felt the blood drain from my face. He had seen it. Just then, I heard the back door creak. Mikhail stepped into the kitchen, wiping his hands on a rag like he'd been working outside. He looked at me, looked at the letter, then back at me. His voice was low. "What's this?" I kept my posture still, my breath even. "A new account, for myself." "Why?" I stared at him for a long time before answering. "Because I need to." He frowned, stepped closer. "What's going on, Layuda?" And just like that, I saw it. The first flicker of fear in his eyes, small, but unmistakable. Like a man who finally realized the ground beneath him might not be as solid as he thought. I didn't say another word. I picked up the letter and walked past him, slow and steady, up the stairs, into our bedroom, closed the door. I could hear him breathing outside, hovering, unsure. And in that moment I knew I had the upper hand. Not because I had a secret, but because now he knew I had one too. And men like Mikhail, they don't do well when they're not the only ones holding the cards. That night, we didn't speak. He slept in the guest room. I could hear the creak of the old mattress through the wall. I lay in our bed, wrapped in silence, feeling a strange sort of peace I hadn't felt in years. Because sometimes, silence is louder than any scream. Sometimes it says, "I know," and worse, "I'm not done yet." The next morning, the air in the house was thick. Mikhail avoided my eyes at breakfast. He stirred his oatmeal like it had wronged him somehow, and I could hear the tension in the way his spoon scraped the bowl. Boris, our golden retriever, lay on the floor between us, sensing something he didn't understand. We didn't speak a word. Not about the letter, not about the new account, not about why he had suddenly moved into the guest room. But the silence between us, it spoke volumes. After he left for the grocery store, or so he claimed, I went to the laundry room. There, in the drawer under the sink, I found the spare key to his locked desk. He thought I didn't know where he kept it. That was his first mistake. I opened the drawer in his study, and there it was, a black leather folder full of documents, receipts, printed emails, photographs. One of them stopped me cold. It was Alina, in our backyard, in my garden. The photo had been taken from his phone, printed out and tucked in with a note. You looked so beautiful today. This place only feels like home when you're here. The paper trembled in my hand. That was my garden, my lavender, my tomato vines, my hydrangeas. She had walked through the space I had built with my hands and claimed it as her own. He had stood there, taking pictures, while I was likely inside folding his shirts, baking his favorite bread, or texting one of our children to tell them their father was doing fine. I sat at the desk and let the anger rise. Not rage, not anymore. Just clarity. There was no excuse left for him to hide behind. He had not slipped. He had not faltered. He had chosen. Repeatedly. Over a decade. I took the photo, folded it in half, and slid it into my purse. That afternoon I called my daughter, Svetlana, who lived up in North Carolina. She picked up with her usual cheerful voice. Mama, you're calling early. Everything okay? Everything's fine, sweetheart. I just wanted to talk. She heard it. The shift. She always had a sense for my tone. Even as a little girl. What's wrong? I paused. Thought about how much to say. Has Papa ever said anything strange to you? Or acted differently? A beat of silence. Then, he's been weird lately, kind of distant. Why? I didn't answer. Directly. Instead, I asked, if something happened between your father and me, would you want to know? Another silence. Then her voice, quieter. Yes. But only if you're ready to tell me. I felt my throat tighten. My little girl, now a grown woman, with kids of her own, giving me permission to be honest, to be vulnerable. Not yet, Lana, but soon. She was quiet again, then said softly, whatever it is, Mama, I'm on your side. I held back tears, because in that moment I realized something important. I wasn't alone, even if Mikhail had betrayed me. My children hadn't. They still saw me. They still believed in me. And that belief, it gave me strength. That night, Mikhail didn't come home until after 10. I didn't ask where he'd been. I didn't need to. His breath didn't smell like alcohol. But he looked like a man who'd been chasing ghosts and found nothing but his own reflection staring back. He tried to speak as he passed me in the hallway. Liuda, I held up my hand, just a gesture. Nothing more. But it was enough to stop him cold. He stood there for a moment, then turned and walked away, shoulders slumped like a man twice his age. I went to bed early, but I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat up in bed, a pen and notebook in hand, listing everything I had learned. Every lie, every proof, every leverage point. Because I wasn't just preparing for a divorce. I was preparing for war. Not to destroy him, but to rebuild myself. Without him. and every name on every document. Every dollar in every account was going to become a brick in that new foundation. He had made the first move, but I was going to finish the game. 2 days passed in an eerie kind of calm. Mikhail was quieter. He moved slower through the house, like a man walking across thin ice, unsure where the next crack might appear. He still made his coffee in the morning, still read the paper like nothing had changed, but I saw it. The tension behind his eyes, the careful pauses in his words. He knew I knew something, and that made him dangerous, but it also made him weak. On Wednesday afternoon, while he was out at his so-called fishing club meeting, I opened the cabinet above the fridge, the one where we kept the holiday tins and old cookbooks. I pulled out the metal recipe box my mother gave me in 1963. Inside, beneath the stained cards for beet salad and pelmeni dough, was a second flash drive. I had made copies of everything: the emails, the photos, the printed messages, even his browser history from the last 12 months. It was all there, saved and labeled. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to protect myself and my name. I wasn't going to let him leave me with nothing after what he had done. By evening, the skies had turned gray. A storm rolled in off the coast, thunder low and lazy, as if the earth itself was groaning with secrets. I stood by the window, watching the rain hit the glass, when I heard him come in. He didn't say a word, just placed his keys in the bowl by the door and went straight to the guest room. I stayed where I was, let the silence speak. That night, I had a dream. In it, I was young again, back in Newark, walking along the canal with my father. He used to hum a Russian lullaby I can still hear in my bones when the nights are quiet. In the dream, he turned to me and said, "You always were stronger than you thought, Lyudmila." I woke up with tears on my cheeks, not from sadness, from release. Because somewhere between the betrayal and the silence, between the strategy and the rage, I had forgotten who I was. I wasn't just Mikhail's wife. I was Lyudmila Ivanovna Sokolova, daughter of strong immigrants, mother of 3, survivor of heartache, keeper of old-world recipes and new-world courage, and I was finally ready to speak. The next morning, I called my son, Alexei, in Tennessee. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Mama, everything okay? Can you come visit this weekend?" He paused. "Of course. Is everything all right?" I took a breath. "I need to tell you something. Face to face. I'll be there Friday night." Simple as that. No questions. No excuses. That's when I knew I wasn't just preparing for the end of a marriage. I was preparing to reclaim my family. That same afternoon, I drove out to the old cemetery where my mother was buried. The wind had picked up, and the oak trees were shedding their leaves like little confessions, scattered and soft on the ground. I stood at her grave for a long time, just breathing in the scent of damp earth and pine needles. "Mama, I thought I was done fighting. I thought I had built a life that couldn't break. But I was wrong." A blue jay landed on the branch above, tilting its head as if listening. He betrayed me. For years. With someone I trusted. But I'm not going to let it destroy me. I'm not going to vanish in my own story. I placed my hand on the headstone. The stone was cold, but my heart was warm, because I had finally said it out loud. When I got home, Mikhail was waiting in the living room. He looked up from his chair, face tense. "Are you leaving me?" I sat down across from him, looked him straight in the eye. "No. You left me 10 years ago. You just didn't have the decency to take your body with you." He blinked, swallowed hard. But I didn't flinch. "I know everything, Mikhail. Every message. Every lie. Every stolen moment in my house, in my garden, with someone I trusted like blood." His lips parted, but I raised a hand. "Don't explain. Don't insult me with apologies now. I'm not here to beg. I'm not here to scream. I'm here to let you know I'm not the same woman who trusted you yesterday." He looked away, and for the first time in 42 years, I think he finally saw me. Not just the version he had shaped to fit his comfort, but the real me. He opened, his mouth to speak again, but this time I stood. "I'm tired, Mikhail. I have nothing more to say tonight." And I walked out. Not because I was defeated, but because I was done playing the quiet, loyal wife. I was ready to become the woman I had buried to survive him. Friday arrived with a strange kind of clarity. The air smelled of wet grass and sun-warmed pavement. One of those southern days where the weather can't make up its mind. I spent the morning cleaning the house, not for Mikhail, but for myself. I washed the floors, dusted every frame, polished the silverware that hadn't seen the light of day since Thanksgiving 3 years ago. It wasn't about control. It was about reclaiming the space. Every corner of that house had been mine once. Then I gave it to him, slowly, without realizing. With every dinner served, every sock folded, every silence endured. But not anymore. By the time the doorbell rang around 5 o'clock, I was ready. Alexei stood there with his duffel bag and worried eyes. He looked so much like his father had in his 30s. Broad-shouldered, quiet, but his heart was always gentler. He hugged me tight, longer than usual. "Mama, what's going on?" "Come in, sweetheart. I'll tell you everything." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had once taught him how to spell his name in Russian with refrigerator magnets. I poured him sweet tea just like he liked, and then I told him. All of it. No sugarcoating, no edits, just truth. He didn't say anything for a long time after I finished. Just ran his hands through his hair, breathing deep. Then finally, 10 years? 10 years? With Alina? Yes. He shook his head slowly. There was a flash of pain in his eyes, the kind you feel not just for yourself, but for someone you love being hurt so deeply. What do you want to do? That question lingered in the air. Not, what's going to happen? Not, how could he? But what do I want to do? And that's when I realized I wasn't trapped anymore. I had a choice. I want to protect myself, legally, financially, emotionally. And if that means divorce, then yes. But only when I'm ready. Alexei reached across the table and took my hand. Then I'll help you, just like that. No hesitation. Later that night, we sat in the living room, just the two of us. Mikhail didn't come home. Or maybe he did, but quietly, through the back, like a ghost. I didn't care. Alexei and I talked about old times, about his kids, about life, and it felt peaceful, honest, like family. Before going to bed, I handed him the flash drive. Everything's on there. I need you to keep it safe. He looked at it, then back at me. You really thought this through. I've had a lot of time to think, and I had. You don't sit with betrayal for 10 years, even unknowingly, without absorbing it into your bones, without carrying it in the way you walk, the way you sigh, the way you measure silence between words. The next morning, Mikhail was in the kitchen when I came downstairs. He was dressed neatly, too neatly, in slacks and a button-down shirt. His hair combed back, clean-shaven. Something was off. "Morning," he said, not looking up from his coffee. "Morning." He cleared his throat. "I made an appointment with Pastor Bennett. For counseling. I think maybe we could talk to someone." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurdly late. 10 years. 10 years of lies, of stolen moments, of whispers in the dark. And now he wanted counseling. "No, Mikhail." He blinked. "No?" I shook my head. "I'm not going to let you treat me like a mistake to be fixed. This isn't a misunderstanding. This isn't a rough patch. This is betrayal, repeated, willful, intimate." He stood up. His voice rose just slightly. "People make mistakes, Liuda. I messed up. But we've built a life. We've been through so much. Don't throw that away." I stepped closer, looked him dead in the eyes. "You threw it away, Mikhail. One night at a time." His jaw clenched. But there was no fight in him anymore. Just fear and shame. He sat back down slowly, as if his legs had given out. I poured myself coffee, took a seat across the table, let the silence fill every inch between us. Because now he knew. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't stalling. I wasn't wounded and waiting. I was preparing. He reached for his mug with a shaky hand. And I smiled, just barely, and said, "Drink up. You're going to need your strength." The next week moved like fog, slow, quiet, and heavy with what hadn't been said. Mikhail became a shadow in our own home. He walked softer, spoke less. Every time he passed me in the hallway or brought in the mail, it was like he was waiting for a sentence he hadn't heard yet. The final word, the final move. But I wasn't rushing. I didn't want revenge. I wanted resolution. That Wednesday, I had my second meeting with Tatiana Morozov. I drove back to Savannah under a sky heavy with clouds, the kind that promise thunder but don't deliver. The air smelled like salt and iron, and my hands were steady on the steering wheel. When I arrived, Tatiana was already waiting with a fresh folder of paperwork. "I've reviewed everything. The accounts, the property, the retirement savings. You're entitled to more than you think." She handed me a sheet of numbers. Clean, clear, cold. Half of everything we'd built together. More, if we could prove financial misconduct or hidden assets. "If you file today, we can freeze joint activity and protect what's yours." I stared at the form for a long time, my name printed across the top like a headline to a life I never thought I'd live. Ludmila Ivanovna Sokolova, plaintiff. I didn't sign. "Not yet. Not today," I said quietly. "I'm not done watching him squirm." Tatiana smiled faintly. "You don't have to rush. Just know. You're in control now." Those words settled deep inside me. Not like a comfort, but like armor. Left her office and took the long way home, stopping by the marina just outside Darien. The water was calm, reflecting the gray sky like a secret. I sat on a bench, watching boats drift lazily in the current, and thought about all the years I spent sailing through a life I didn't even realize had holes in the hull. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the same way. I was awake. That night, I made dinner. Borscht and rye bread, the kind that takes hours but fills the house with warmth. Mikhail came downstairs and sat at the table without speaking. Halfway through the meal, he looked up. I don't know what to say anymore. I didn't stop eating. Then don't say anything. He nodded slowly, like he'd finally understood. After we finished, I stood up and said, "There's something you need to do." "What's that?" "Write her. End it. Clean. Final. No what-ifs. No door left open. Not for me. For yourself." He didn't argue. Just said, "Okay," and that surprised me. I left him in the kitchen and walked to our bedroom, sat at my vanity, looked in the mirror. The woman staring back was the same one who had held 3 babies in her arms, who had buried both her parents, who had made soup for neighbors after hurricanes, who had prayed every night for strength. But now her strength had a new shape. It wasn't silent, it was sovereign. An hour later, I walked back downstairs. Mikhail handed me a sealed envelope. I wrote it. "You can read it if you want. I didn't take it. It's not for me. It's for your soul." He nodded. His eyes were glassy, and I could see it. The cracks in the image he'd built for himself. Not just of the man who cheated, but the man who thought he could get away with it and still be loved the same way. Because the truth is, love changes. Not always with time, sometimes with truth. He went to bed early. I stayed up, folding laundry, watching an old black and white movie I barely paid attention to. My thoughts were louder than the TV. What kind of woman spends over 4 decades building a life with someone who disappears from it without ever leaving? What kind of man lives a double life and still expects a seat at the table? And what kind of woman wakes up at 78 years old and decides she's not afraid to start over? This one. I stood by the window, watching the light of the neighbors' porch flicker through the trees, and I smiled. Because whether or not I filed that divorce, whether or not I burned it all down, I had already left. The moment I stopped needing his permission to feel powerful. The moment I realized the silence between us was no longer punishment. It was protection. He had betrayed me for 10 years, but I had reclaimed myself in 10 days. And that was something he could never undo. Saturday morning came with a softness I hadn't felt in years. The sun filtered through the lace curtains like a quiet blessing. I stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around my coffee mug, listening to the low hum of birds outside. Everything in the house was still, but not dead, just calm. And for the first time in a long while, I realized something. I was no longer afraid of him. Not of his words, not of his silence, not of the history we shared. That fear, the one that whispers you'll be nothing without him, it was gone. And in its place, a strange kind of joy, the kind that comes not from winning, but from letting go. Around 10 o'clock, Mikhail shuffled into the kitchen. His face was pale, eyes hollow, as if he hadn't slept all night. He sat down without a word. I placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. He stared at it. "Thank you," I nodded. Didn't sit. After breakfast, We need to talk. His fork hovered for a second, then dropped with a soft clink. Is it time? I tilted my head. Time for what? For you to leave? Or for me to leave? I stepped closer. No, Mikhail, it's time for the truth. He sighed, rubbing his temples. I've told you everything I can. Not everything. I reached into the drawer beneath the microwave and pulled out a small notebook. My journal. The same one I'd been writing in since Alina appeared on my porch. I opened it to a page from earlier that week and slid it across the table. He read the first few lines. His hands trembled. I forgave you before you even apologized. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry your sins in my bones. He looked up at me, and his lips parted. But no words came out. I'm not staying out of fear, Mikhail. And I'm not leaving out of spite. I sat across from him, leaned in and said clearly, I'm staying because I choose peace, and I will have it, with or without you. That hit him harder than a slap ever could. He looked away. I ruined us. No, I corrected. You ruined you. I'm still here, and stronger than ever. He nodded slowly, eyes wet. What do you want me to do? I stood. I want you to pack a bag, take a few days, go to your brother's. Think, pray. Be a man finally. Face what you've done, alone. To my surprise, he didn't argue. He rose, walked upstairs, and quietly began packing. No tantrum, no denial, just silence. An hour later, he came down with a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. We stood in the doorway like strangers. He turned to me one last time. Do you hate me? I took a breath. No, I pity you. Because you had everything, and you traded it for secrets. He opened his mouth. Maybe to defend himself, maybe to apologize again. But I raised a hand. Go, Mikhail. And he did. He walked out that door, not with anger, but with the weight of someone who had finally looked in the mirror and seen the wreckage of his choices. I closed the door behind him, locked it, and leaned against the wood. For a long time I stood there, heart pounding, not from sadness, but from release. Then I laughed, a deep, rich laugh from somewhere low in my belly, because he was gone, and I was still here, still whole, still. Ludmila. Later that day, I sat on the porch with Boris curled at my feet. I watched the neighbors' kids ride bikes up and down the street, their laughter like wind chimes in motion. My phone buzzed. It was a message from my granddaughter. Love, you babushka, can't wait to visit next month. I smiled. Because while Mikhail had spent 10 years betraying my heart, I had spent 78 building something bigger than him. A family, a home, and a soul that wouldn't break. That evening, I walked into the garden, the same one Alina once stood in like she belonged there. I knelt in the dirt, hands in the earth, pulling weeds and trimming back the roses, and I whispered, not to her, not to him, but to myself, I am still blooming.